and welcome to the Zambia 2026 General Elections Program. My name is Victor Mwila. As Zambia prepares for the August 13, 2026 general elections, election observation remains an important part of promoting transparency and public confidence in the electoral process. In this edition, we speak to the Deputy Chief Observer of the European Union Election Observation Mission, Dr. Beata Martin Rozumiłowicz, as we discuss the mission's mandate, how it carries out its work, and the methods the EU EOM is using to observe the electoral process across the country. Dr. Beata, I would like to welcome you to this program, and it's a pleasure. Thank you for finding time in your busy schedule to accommodate this interview.
And thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. Zikom.
We appreciate. You arrived at the close of June 2026 with a host of other 11.
That's right.
So far, how have you found this country, and generally, what's your gauge of the atmosphere? The electoral campaigns are going on.
So as you say, we arrived at the end of June, the 29th of June, with a contingent of 11 experts looking at all the different aspects of the election process. We were also joined by 32 long-term observers last week. They were trained in Lusaka for 4 days, and now they've been deployed throughout the country to all of the provinces, to all of the regions of Zambia. And I think the welcome has been very warm, and we've had good access to interlocutors so far. And we're really looking forward to getting into the depth of the observation now that we have people across the country. We're focusing on various elements of the campaign, but we've also looked at initial stages of the election process, like constituency delimitation, like the nomination of candidates, like voter registration, and we'll have a composite picture that we'll be presenting after Election Day.
Over the past few weeks, you have engaged with political party representatives, some presidential candidates.
Yes.
What has really stood out in these meetings with some of the members of different political parties that you having met so far?
So I think the plurality of political competition is something that stands out. So as we know, there are 14 candidates that will be on the ballot on Election Day. We've already met with a large number of those candidates, although we will seek to meet with all of them eventually. And we're also at the national and regional level meeting with candidates for the National Assembly, but also for local councils and mayors. And so all levels of this general election are things that we will be evaluating.
I know your work usually involves long days of travel and meetings across the country. Just tell us, what does a typical day look like for you as Deputy Chief Observer?
So in the capital, we met with a variety of interlocutors to get a view of all points of the election process. And so from my point of view, I'm meeting with the diplomatic community, I'm meeting with the various ministries, but I'm also meeting with candidates and civil society organizations, members of the media. Then we have various analysts who specialize in specific fields. And so we have a media monitoring team that is looking at the way that media covers these elections across 12 different broadcast and print media. We have a special dedicated social media analyst who is looking at the online space and looking at issues of disinformation or incendiary speech, hopefully not hate speech, but things that might influence the way the campaign is presented to the electorate. And then at the lower level, the long-term observers are meeting with all of those interlocutors in the regions, in the districts, to really build a full picture of how the election is being processed. And last but not least, the election administration is a key component. We meet with them on a regular basis, both at the central level, but also at the regional and district level, to better understand how they're implementing these elections, especially under this new electoral system and with a new electoral legal framework.
You are a highly experienced international election expert. And this is not the first election you are observing.
No.
Would you tell us about your background? I know you've been to Europe, you've been to Asia, the Middle East, and even the Americas.
Yes.
What really inspired you to get into election observation and democratic governance, just at a personal level?
Yeah, I think it's really my family background and the historical background in Poland, where my parents grew up during a war, a world war that took place, and they really didn't have the opportunity to express their points of view or to elect democratic representatives that would represent their particular interests. In 1990, with the fall of the Berlin Wall, suddenly there was the opportunity to have more democratic governments, and I really committed to the idea that democracy is a way of avoiding conflict, is a way of avoiding violence, and that if citizens of countries channel their interests through democratic institutions, the chance of having these kinds of large-scale conflicts is reduced, and that really is at the heart of why I do this work.
Very passionate. You know, I've listened to you on various platforms, and I see the passion in you. I hear it.
Thank you.
And we are grateful, of course, that you are on this platform today. Let's look at the mandate of the EU Election Observation Mission in Zambia. What exactly is your mandate as you get down to work? You are already working.
So we're here at the invitation of the Zambian authorities, and the Zambian authorities have committed over a period of time to various international documents, conventions, principles, including in the area of elections, which includes things like democratic elections, credible elections, ones which are inclusive, ones which are equal and transparent, and give access to all members of society. And so our mandate is really to come here and in a long-term methodology look at all of the aspects of the election process against those international standards and norms, and to get a sense of the degree to which they are matching with these kinds of high-level principles, and if there are issues or if there are areas of improvement, to raise those issues and to make them public so that in the future improvements can be made and democracy can continue to move forward in Zambia.
And how do you maintain neutrality in your engagements with various key electoral stakeholders?
So independence and impartiality are really at the heart of our election observation methodology. It's something which is instilled in every election observer who comes on these missions. We all abide by a code of conduct, which we sign and we verify that we understand that we are not to take any political sides, we are not to have any political preferences. And in all of our meetings and all of our interactions, we seek to meet the full range of interlocutors from all political sides, from all civil society sides, and really to build a comprehensive picture which gives voice to every point of view without taking any partisan position.
Okay, let's look at how you conduct this observation before, during, and after the polls. What exactly happens?
So we deploy approximately 2 months before election day. We really look at a comprehensive set of criteria for how elections and how the process is developing and taking place. And as I mentioned, all the way through from constituencies being defined and delimited through various elements of the process, including the voter registration, including the way that candidates are nominated, and then how the campaign is developing, how it's being projected in the public domain, whether all political sides have equal ability to present their position to voters, whether they have the equal ability to meet and assemble in line with international principles, how the media interacts in that campaign and presents different points of view, also how social media plays into that narrative. And then coming towards election day, we're going to be augmented by another 50 to 60 short-term observers who will be fundamentally looking at the election process in polling stations on election day. So from the opening of polling stations at 6 in the morning all the way through the voting process over a series of polling stations, and eventually looking at the counting in the polling station that they end up in, the tabulation of results, the transmission of those results to the higher level, and then the establishment of the preliminary results by the ECZ. We'll also be here after the elections to look at any complaints or appeals that may be launched, any court cases that may take place, and eventually the announcement of the final results after all of those processes have been taken into account. And then after 2 months or so, we will issue a final report which will also contain concrete recommendations on how circumstances can be improved in the future, and also develop an action plan together with our EU delegation, which remains on the ground permanently, in terms of how to assist and how to help those recommendations being met.
Are there issues of particular focus that the observers are looking at during this mission?
So I think all of those elements that I mentioned, all of the various parts of the election process, also the inclusion of women, the inclusion of persons with disability, and in general the idea that the franchise of elections is something that should be gradually expanded to each and every citizen on the same terms and with the same conditions. And so we really look at the elections from that perspective.
Great. So since you came, in our country, this is the first time that we have quite a good number of independent candidates contesting elections across the country. What does that say about Zambia's democracy?
It shows a plurality of political positions. It shows a vibrancy, I would say, of the political class. But that is also now to be translated into a process which hopefully will reflect the choices and the votes of individual citizens in the country, and really to see the extent to which the eventual House of Representatives, President, lower level representatives reflect the will of the people at that level.
Well, viewers, if you have just joined us, you are watching the Zambia 2026 elections program, and we are hosting the European Union Election Observation Mission to Zambia. And on the set with me is Dr. Beata Martin Rozumiłowicz, and we are discussing issues of their mandate and how the mission carries out its work. That includes, looking at various aspects of the electoral process across the country. And you are present everywhere. Yes. Would you give us that assurance?
Yes, so we do have observers present in every province, looking at elections not only in the urban areas, but also in rural areas, in villages, in towns, to get a very clear perspective of how things look overall, and not in any one specific location, and also not to be capital-centric, which I think is often a problem with election observation. So really having a spread of observers to see with our own eyes and to hear with our own ears how the elections are proceeding.
Is there any collaboration with local election monitors? How are you working with the Electoral Commission of Zambia as well?
So the Election Commission of Zambia is our primary partner, I would say, and we have regular meetings with them, both at a high level but also at a working level, to understand how they will be implementing this election process. We look at the various procedures and regulations that they introduce, the guidelines that are produced, and the voter information that goes out to citizens, and we evaluate that against both the national legislation, which is new in this case, and against those international principles. We cooperate well with civil society, not only in Zambia, but across the globe. And there is a global network of election monitors which sign up to certain principles and also sign up to certain code of conducts. And so there are organizations within Zambia that meet those requirements, and we regularly meet with them to hear their points of view and also to exchange information. At the higher level, we have a similar community of good practice called the Declaration of Principles, which is now more than 50 different organizations. And so we also coordinate with organizations like the African Union or with SADC or COMESA or the Commonwealth. And I understand that many of them will also be here for the election process. And so we speak with them regularly, we meet regularly, and we observe under similar methodologies, which also fall under these global principles.
Long-term and short-term role of observers in the mission's work, what role are they playing?
So in the EU framework, long-term observation was really profiled from an early date, with the understanding that while election day is important, as we were discussing before, the before, during, and after are equally important to understand how elections take place. And so in general, the European Union deploys full-scale election observation missions, which have both a long-term and a short-term component. And we try to be on the ground for approximately 3 or 4 months, depending on the circumstances. So hopefully that really presents a comprehensive understanding of an election process in each country.
Okay, so let's look at what this country should expect from the mission's findings and recommendations after the elections.
So I think that people should expect an honest and clear picture of how the elections took place and a transparent presentation of an independent voice, almost a mirror to society of how these elections were conducted. And then as colleagues, as friends, as people who are working in the same direction, to give those recommendations in a constructive spirit to say, we're working together in a democratic direction, and these are the kinds of changes that would be helpful for further democratic processes, so that hopefully on the next occasion, better assessments and more clear pictures can be obtained.
I did mention that this is not your first election observation mission. You've been to several countries, in Africa included, not so? So, so far, looking at what you've seen in this country and what you've seen elsewhere, how is Zambia doing?
So I think it's a little bit too early to say, because we've only been here for a few weeks. Also, we don't compare elections between countries or even elections between time periods. Each election is unique, each has its own dynamics, and the extent to which they match the election principles and the international standards is the yardstick that we use. And as you can imagine, a country like Zambia, in comparison to a country like Mongolia or a country like Peru, has very different contextual environments and different circumstances, and yet they hold the same principles as examples of how they can proceed, and those are the kinds of elements that we look at.
Let me put you on the spot and election coverage. I know you've been to, like I did mention, you've been to several media institutions, some of which invited you to speak.
Yes.
How is the media covering these elections here in Zambia? Are you happy with the way the media is doing?
So as I mentioned, we have a full-scale media monitoring unit who is looking at 12 different broadcast and print media sources. It's a qualitative as well as a quantitative monitoring. And so by the election day and our preliminary statement, which comes 2 days after the elections, we should be able to give a comprehensive picture of how media has been involved in that process. And obviously there are certain obligations under the Broadcasting Act for equality of coverage during the campaign period. But because that monitoring is still underway and it requires time to be able to make that assessment credibly, that's something to look forward to in our preliminary statement after the elections.
We have talked about this, but I'll still come back to it. And we're talking about independence, impartiality, and objectivity.
Yes.
On one hand, you are meeting the opposition, and you also meet the ruling party.
Yes, that's right.
How do you strike that balance to just make sure that you do not lean to either side?
I think it's also perceiving the political environment as having a government and opposition, but also many other political parties and many other political voices, and they are equally relevant to the conversation. And so we meet with the opposition, we meet with the government, we hear their points of view, we don't take positions on those points of view, we document their concerns, we document their grievances, we then investigate with our own eyes and with our own ears, not only in the capital, but also in all of the regions of Zambia. And so if we hear specific allegations or if we hear specific issues that are being raised, we go ourselves and we talk to the individuals concerned to verify what point of view and which piece of information is valid and what may be hearsay or unprovable. And we try to present that evidence, fact-based information in the report that we make, the preliminary statement and eventually the final report. And in that way, really try to maintain the balance and impartiality between all of the different political positions.
Let me ask you to give your final remarks and perhaps speak to Zambians across the country.
Wonderful. So I really hope that for these elections, it will be a vibrant process. It will be a process where people see themselves reflected and are able to hear many different points of view, but that ultimately they feel safe and protected in going to polling stations, in making their choice independently and free from any concerns about violence or free from any concerns about intimidation, and that ultimately the vote, which is then resulting in a representative parliament, reflects their concerns, reflects their interests, and reflects their choices.
Dr. Beata, I would like to once again say thank you very much for accepting the invitation to come and appear on Zanis TV and sharing these great insights with us. We really appreciate.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Well, viewers, that's it. We were hosting Deputy Chief Observer of the European Union Observation Mission to Zambia, Dr. Beata Martin Rozumiłowicz, on issues regarding the mission's mandate and how it carries out its work. Thank you for watching the Zambia 2026 General Elections program. Join us again as we continue bringing you informative discussions with key stakeholders ahead of the August 13, 2026 general elections. My name is Victor Mwila. It's bye for now.